Paltrocast.
We have here tonight author, librarian, private investigator, and Paltrocast host Darren Paltrowitz to talk, show, and tell you about all those amazing venues that Long Island may have forgotten about that are so iconic. So please join me in welcoming today Darren Paltrowitz for Long Island Music History, Forgotten Venues of Long Beach and Island Park.
Thank you very much to the Long Beach Public Library for being such a long-term supporter of me and what I do in the arts. That's Tom, that's Allie, that's Michaela, that's Sarah, and one of my mentors, Regina G. Feeney from the Freeport Memorial Library. But we're here to document forgotten venues of Long Beach and Island Park. There's other venues. Some of them are still active. For example, Barn and Ballroom in Island Park is still booking some artists. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the ones that are here and a little bit more about me, the presenter. I've worked in management. My last book, DLR book, How David Lee Roth Changed the World, it was presented here thanks to Tom and team at the Long Beach Public Library last year. And I interview a lot of people here in Long Beach for the Paltrocast. And the roots of this presentation are basically from something that Regina G. Feeney at the Freeport Memorial Library had me put together, which was a guide of lost venues and forgotten venues on Long Island. So much history has happened here, yet it's not always super remembered or documented. And sometimes when people remember these things, they may not be remembering everything. So one of the things you're going to hear me say a lot is, we're going to come back to that. And I promise we're going to come back to that a lot. So as an introduction, Long Island has been a long-term major hub for live music, music videos, recording studios for more than half a century. And beyond big venues, there's been local clubs, bars, hotels. Ultimately, as Tom said in the introduction, some of the biggest stars of all time have played here. I don't mean Long Island, I mean Long Beach and Island Park. And so the focus of this is the live entertainment venues of this and the neighboring town. And the sources are a mix of research of things that I personally looked into, information I directly obtained, and comments from other people as part of that. So if you have questions, let's save them to the end if we have time, or maybe we'll do this in a follow-up session about other venues. But my contact information is going to be at the end of the presentation. And thank you in advance for listening. And as we see right here, by the way, we have Joan Jett in the top left. That's a music video that she filmed here in Long Beach on the boardwalk called Change the World. In the middle, you see the Beastie Boys in some swimsuits. That's a mid-'80s music video that they did for She's On It, which was produced on an album by Lido Beach native Rick Rubin. And to the right of that, a Public Enemy video. You see Flavor Flav and Chuck D for Brothers Gonna Work It Out, which was partially filmed on the boardwalk, some of it near where the Radio Shack used to be here in town. But again, this is about the venues. And here, the venues, we see Leone's. If you look closely on the left, you see the Starbucks, which is the same building as that Burger King in the middle. That's half a block, would you say, Tom, here? A block and a half from here? Yes, Leone's 2 Park Avenue here in Long Beach. It was kind of a small dive bar which occasionally hosted known artists. And the photo that we see in the bottom right is the Kinks, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band, the Kinks. They played in Long Beach, and that was a warm-up show. You can now these days go there as a Starbucks. There's a lot of different research on there. Some people say that Vanilla Fudge performed there. They're going to come up a lot in this presentation. Some people say Savoy Brown, which some of those members formed Foghat. Some people say T-Rex. We're going to get a little bit into that because a recurring theme is sometimes people misremember which venue things happened at. Those might have happened at a venue that we're going to see in a little bit called the Action House. Moving ahead, Junction. That's pretty much across the street from here. Right now, it is a breakfast spot called Toast. And it had a lot of different names over the years. For a while, it had live music events. Deer Tick, we saw them play there. And by we, I mean myself and my wife. The cursor that I'm moving right here, there's my wife. There's part of my head right there. But the singer of this band, John McCauley, is married to Vanessa Carlton. And Mark Normand, who's a big Joe Rogan comic these days, he's played at Madison Square Garden a few times. He played there. Jessica Kirson from America's Got Talent played there. Every now and then, these national acts popped up across the street at Junction. But we're not just scraping the bottom of the barrel here. We are moving on to the Lido Club Hotel. If you speak to Long Beach natives and locals, there's so many nicknames for this building that is still there. Some people call it the Pink Palace. Some people call it Mother Russia because of the tops of the buildings right there. But it was a hotel. And if you go through and scour comments, you'll see that a scene from The Godfather was filmed there. Not super documented, but it looks like room 242 was in a scene of The Godfather. It's no longer a hotel. It's more like a gated community that's got a great pool. Rumor is it's got some cabanas, but you'll see when it comes to the names on the cursor right here, Barbra Streisand played there in, I believe, 1963. Sammy Davis Jr., Connie Francis. Of course, this is Connie Francis like 60 years before that TikTok renaissance that she basically had. But there's an article from Newsday from 2017 about how her playing at the Coliseum was the first time she'd played at a Long Island venue in something like 55 years or something like that. So I'm going to be doing on a long-term basis more research to see who else played at this. But most people don't realize it was a hotel that had performers playing at that venue. And as it says right here, Debbie Harry from Blondie's been reported as playing there. I think Setlist FM has that. I don't believe that's the case. I think that she played at Malibu. So some of this venue information's out there. And there is some of that Barbra Streisand article. There's a book to get more information about the former hotel that I think is called Lido Towers nowadays. But if you go a couple blocks away from there, there's a building that is still there that was, I believe, built in the 60s. Back then it was called the Azores. It, I believe, as you see in the New York Times article, 5-story luxury apartment building with a private beach area. And you would just go these days, oh, cool building. I like it. It looks nice. But it was actually also a concert venue. If you wanted to meet Miss Azores, we're about 60-ish years too late of seeing them and Joe and Sandy and all that. But if you see the name right there where the cursor is going, Harvey Weisenberg, if you see that name, little display of that gentleman here in the Long Beach Public Library, one in the same. So it's cool to see that history going on. And more of a supper club, but still live music is live music. That place, that building's still standing at 830 Shore Road. A couple more graphics you see there. You could have an extravagant prime rib dinner for $3.95 back in 1964. And there was a thing about the Lenny Kaye Orchestra playing there. And that is not the Lenny Kaye who played with Patti Smith, who, if you remember earlier in this presentation, we're going to come back to that one. We're going to come back to Lenny Kaye. But as you can see, the hospital presented things there. Different people made things happen there. It's sad that it's just an apartment building, but hey, there you go. But one more thing about the Azores. Carmine Appice. Sometimes people call him Appice. Sometimes they call him a Peachy. Sometimes a Piece. He has played with Rod Stewart and Ozzy Osbourne and Pink Floyd and Paul Stanley and Sly Stone. One of the greatest drummers, I would say, of all time. His band Vanilla Fudge took Led Zeppelin on their first U.S. tour. He used to live in Oceanside and he used to live in the Azores. I can't tell you if he played any gigs in that showroom. I'll have to ask the next time I speak with him. That's a still image from the second time I interviewed him. Nice guy, big fan of what he does. And he co-wrote the Rod Stewart song, Do You Think I'm Sexy? Which people still hear today. And again, we are going to come back to that one. The next one, Malibu. I know Karen has been there before. Still operational as a restaurant. I believe the address is 1500 Lido Boulevard. But it's more than a restaurant. And you see at the bottom right there, New Wave Dare to Be Different. That was a documentary about a famous radio station, sometimes called WLIR, sometimes called WDRE, depending on where on Long Island you were. They had different radio call letters and frequencies. But a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the biggest British bands of all time, the first market they really made it in was Long Island because of these radio stations. No one wanted to play Depeche Mode, no one wanted to play U2, etc., except that station. But if you look to the left of that Malibu sign, it talks about some of the artists that played there in the 60s, the Isley Brothers, the Parliaments, which was the precursor to George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. They were playing there. I think the Four Seasons played there. A lot of bands have played there. I have to update one of my guides, but The Who played there in 1967 as a warm-up gig for a tour. The Who, the same band that played Jones Beach this summer, I think there's 3 or 4 different bands who played Jones Beach this summer. They're in this presentation. That their earliest runs, they played in Island Park or Lido Beach or Long Beach, and now they're playing MetLife, or rather Jones Beach. Pretty impressive. And moving along, we see some of the artists that have played at Malibu, and that includes U2 and David Lee Roth from Van Halen, Vince Neil from Motley Crue, and the Ramones. I think the Ramones have played there at least 5 times they played there. Dream Theater, whose drummer was originally from Long Beach, Mike Portnoy. By City Hall, he has a brick that says something like "Happy 40th Birthday, Mike Portnoy," that his family bought for him. And his father, or rather his stepfather, I believe, was the owner of that Leone's Club where the Kinks played in the 60s, or he was for a period. But if you go through other artists that you see on this list, the Deftones, they've played the Madison Square Garden a few times and have a tequila on the market. Fight, that has Rob Halford from Judas Priest and Faith No More and Marilyn Manson and Deborah Harry, where we came back to that one. Smashing Pumpkins, who play City Field and Jones Beach, and Ministry, and so many iconic bands have played there. And below that, you see some stills from some of the interviews I've did with these artists that I've taped here in Long Beach, like Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins. And moving to the next slide, we see some of the flyers. There was Culture Club playing there with Boy George. I don't know about the Spoons, the opening act. It is not the modern band Spoon that's very popular, but we see Ministry right there. I believe that was before they became a really dark industrial band. That was their new wave era. Yeah, great band. Karen's seen them. I saw them at Jones Beach, I think 2 summers ago with Filter, who also played at Malibu. We see Joan Jett playing there, and she's going to be appearing a few times in here. She still lives a lot of the time in Long Beach and Rockville Center. And we see Buddy Miles, who played with Hendrix. Great artist right there. Gary U.S. Bonds, I believe he's a Long Island Music Hall of Famer who inspired Springsteen. Moving ahead, that is a bootleg of U2. So if you wanted to see, or rather hear, their 1981 performance in Malibu, you can. And if you want to hear Culture Club from 83, you can. And you want to hear the Pixies, yes, the Pixies, the really cool band that inspired Nirvana, yes, they played here. And yes, you can hear that. I believe that is very easy to find on YouTube, all of these. Moving ahead, we have some ticket stubs. Karen mentioned before we started here, Joe Jackson. He has played here. Hot Tuna with Yorma played here. Space Hog, Too Much Joy. A lot of interesting people. And thankfully, a lot of the photos and audio has survived. But not a lot of video, unfortunately, for Malibu. That stuff we have to track down. Moving on to a great venue that unfortunately people don't talk about these days, the Action House. The Action House, and we are going to come back to this one. Located at 50 Austin Boulevard in Island Park, the Action House was a club-sized venue that some people have called Long Island's premier music venue. Prior to being the Action House, it was the Shell House. After that, it was Rockpile, Speak Easy, and Speaks. Speaks sometimes with an apostrophe, like a possessive, sometimes speaks without it. Sometimes it was called Speaks Disco. It had a lot of names, and we're going to get into why that is in a little bit. But 50 Austin Boulevard, some people call 50 Broadway. And when you think about the artists that played there, Marvin Gaye, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. There's a flyer which we're going to see in here for Frank Zappa, but that's disputed as to whether or not they showed up and played. But the Velvet Underground played, and that was an event that Andy Warhol presented at, and we're going to see some photos from that. Pre-fame Billy Joel played there with the Hassles. Cream, including Eric Clapton, played there. Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne, their first U.S. tour. We're going to see a little bit of it. The Yardbirds with Jimmy Page before Led Zeppelin. Two Nights of the Doors, the Allman Brothers, members of Grand Funk Railroad, King Crimson, just a lot of people. And the owner, Phil Basil, I believe it's pronounced. I've heard Basil. I've heard a lot of things. I don't want to get his name wrong, but he opened up other venues, and we're going to come back to that a little bit. Some people have said that this is the same location where OBI West was. We're going to see some disputed information about that and also industry. But Phil managed Vanilla Fudge, and going back a few slides, the Azores resident Carmine Appice was a member of that band, and then he played with Beck Bogart Appice with Jeff Beck, the legendary guitarist. And so Jeff Beck was there, etc. And you can hear a little bit of audio. The Vagrants, which was Leslie West from Mountain's band before Mountain, some of that is on YouTube, and we're going to get some photos in a little bit. More about it in a LibGuide that I published through the Freeport Memorial Library. So there we have the matchbook. And we have some flyers. We see Fleetwood Mac, and we see Timothy Leary, the inventor of LSD, supposedly, and the Grateful Dead and all that. But if you could see my cursor, it might be a little hard to find. If you look at the matchbook, 50 Austin Boulevard. Then we look at the middle flyer, 50 Broadway. So different places had different addresses for this establishment, and we're going to come back to why that is significant in a little bit. But on this next one, you see Dr. John and Chicago. Chicago's a band that plays Jones Beach almost every summer. Chuck Berry, Ricky Nelson, Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper's here a lot at Jones Beach. You see The Cream, which is Eric Clapton and Cream, but they're not even single headlining. They're with Moby Grape on that. Cream did 2 nights there in Island Park. That cracks me up to think that Eric Clapton, who played Madison Square Garden a week or two ago, was there. And then here we see in the top center one, a couple under Sean and I, we see the Spencer Davis Group. Singer of Spencer Davis Group was Steve Winwood. I think he was opening up for Eric Clapton at the Garden, or at least he has. So all these Garden people there. There's Wilson Pickett, Land of a Thousand Dances. There's Rod Stewart. I said it was going to come back to him. Blue Cheer, they're considered like inventors of heavy metal because of one of their first songs. Delaney and Bonnie, they were Clapton collaborators. Canned Heat, The Vagrants, that was Leslie Western Mountain. Mitch Rutter, Detroit Wheels. The Rascals, who were then the Young Rascals. Trapeze, I believe that had Glenn Hughes, who was in Deep Purple. Badfinger, which was a band on the Beatles label, and Mariah Carey did their song Without You. There we see Cactus, Carmine Appice after he left. Vanilla Fudge, he formed that group. But you see Humble Pie, which I think Peter Frampton was in the group at that point. A few years later, he'd make Frampton Comes Alive, partially at Comac Arena on Long Island. So here in this photo in the top right, we see Jimmy Page in that. I'm colorblind, but I think it's a purple suit. I think it's purple. Couple of photos of Jim Morrison from him playing at the Action House underneath that. We see a different flyer, Fleetwood Mac. We see the Rich Kids. I think they used to play with a pre-fame Billy Joel a lot. Buddy Rich, the famous jazz drummer, was playing there, so it wasn't just rock. The Amboy Dukes, that was Ted Nugent before he was a solo artist. The Small Faces and Rod Stewart, you see them again. And then in the bottom left, you see that band could not make it. Canned Heat, they sent out an apology note. So sometimes they'd advertise a gig, it wouldn't happen. Then sometimes the gig next to it, you see the free food and the free booze. You never knew what you were going to get at the Action House. And here's Andy Warhol, Nico from the Velvet Underground, a couple photos of them, a ticket stub for Rod Stewart. You could see him for $3 if you didn't have the coupon. And here is a 1971 New York Times article talking about how cool Island Park is. Couple more things on this venue. There's the Ronettes performing there in 1966. I believe they were on the same billing as the Andy Warhol Velvet Underground show. Couple of more Jimmy Page in purple, because you see, it looks like purple in the top, but then it's different attire underneath it. But notably, he's doing the violin bow trick that he was doing with Led Zeppelin. And then there's a little more of Nico. And it looks like the Yardbirds and Jimmy Page did 3 nights there. Don't know how accurate this is. So one of the things I called attention to was the address. It's all over the place. Is it 50 Austin Boulevard? Is it 50 Broadway? What is it? So being a private investigator like Tom called out, I said, I'm going to do Freedom of Information Act and see what property records I can get. So I put 50 Austin Boulevard over to Nassau County, and they had no record of it. And they also denied my Freedom of Information Act request. And you put 50 Austin Boulevard onto Google Maps, and it shows the Wendy's, which is not that. So I was trying to figure out what is the correct address. It is 50 Broadway, which is basically means it's on the block with Docs, DOX, that bar. It's near the storage space. I figured it out through an online commenter who was talking about it, where they were talking about, oh, it's by the security storage place. And then I started to find more things like these zebra flyers that started saying this dance club was at 50 Broadway. But so thank you, Zebra. Thank you, Freelance Vandals. Thank you, commenters who pointed out seeing Three Dog Night there, another one of the biggest bands ever. But did you know that America's top selling rock band of all time played in Island Park? Aerosmith played in Island Park in 1980, and you can hear it. Um, yes, Karen missed that show, unfortunately. I did too, because I unfortunately was not alive yet, but that's not the point. There's a comment here that says, Aerosmith played there in April 1980. It was a Sunday night and my 21st birthday. I was there too. The last set was about 1 a.m. There were maybe 50 people left in the place. The band was a mess in those days. So Aerosmith forever has ties to Long Island because Richie Supa, who did some of their songs, is from Massapequa. The last gig they ever did was at UBS Arena on Long Island. They're forever tied to the island. But did you know that they played in Island Park? Probably not. And yes, they did Dream On, and they did a lot of your favorite songs. Down the block, A Taberna, great restaurant. It used to be the C Note Cafe, a couple of punk and hardcore shows there. The band Cave In played there. Glassjaw, who Tom and I were talking about earlier, played there once or twice. The Movie Life, who Tom also knows, played there. God Forbid. I know E-Town Concrete played there. Silent Majority, a very influential hardcore band, also played there. So whenever you're eating that great Portuguese food at A Taberna, think of the metal and hardcore and punk royalty that graced that area. And when I mentioned earlier about my Freedom of Information Act being denied by Nassau County, there is record of that. I sent it to a few different offices, and apparently property records does not keep property records. That is what we learned. Thank you, Nassau County. I'm going to keep investigating and see what permits I can get. But the next one, Channel 80. Channel 80, we got an oh yeah. It was located at 80 Waterfront Boulevard, also one of Phil's clubs, also known as Jay Spratt's. I believe it closed in 97 at Jay Spratt's. Believe it was also called the Bridgeview Yacht Club, which, if so, was just unfortunately knocked down in the past 2 months. The Fix played there, Zebra played there, Eek a Mouse played there. That's a good reggae artist. They did events with Hot 97, WLIR. One of my struggles was trying to figure out, is this the same exact spot as Spratt's? Was this the same spot as the Action House? Was this the same spot as Rockpile? I'm getting the no from Karen, because Karen knows, because she was there. Karen may have had the thing that we're going to see on the next page, the VIP card. Did you have that, Karen? Sure. Well, unfortunately, she did not have that card, but it warranted for some people to have a VIP card. and logoed kind of things. And you can find great resources like that on Facebook. And, going back, you see what a party vibe in that top right photo it was. But Jordan's Lobster is still next door. There's the VIP thing. Next one, we see Joan Jett performing there. And it's interesting to me if you look at the photo on the left and the photo on the right, it's the same gig, but how different the lighting is. So it looks like a daytime gig on the left and a nighttime gig on the right. That's a mystery unto itself, but it looks like a fun club on the water. You see the alternate views underneath it. And I did not get to go to that. I did go to Bridgeview a few times. Rumors a lot of the New York Mets would hang out there, but that's another story for another time. Let's move along to Who is Phil? Allegedly, he did a thing or two, this gentleman who opened up these clubs. But if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, Henry Hill, who's kind of the narrator and focal point, worked for Phil. And Phil was a big part of Concerts East. So a lot of the concert history on Long Island, Calderone Hall and all that, is because of him and his organization. So if we put aside legal stuff and just think about what he contributed to this area, kind of the godfather of this scene, why we have this rich history. So thank you to him and his family. Moving along to another island park spot, Club California. Very little survives about this spot. You see in the bottom left a photo of the Ramones performing there in '88. This is believed to have been in the same spot as the Action House, Speaks, Industry, and Archie's. The Stray Cats perform there. Ranking Roger from the Beat and General Public perform there. You can hear this Ramones show from Club California. I relied on research to try and figure out where this place was, but there's not flyers surviving. There's very little besides the fact that the Ramones played there, the Stray Cats, stuff on Setlist FM. Moving ahead a little bit, it looks like the Ramones, pretty much any venue that there ever was on Long Island that had a national headliner, the Ramones played there. If I do another presentation, you're going to see places in Freeport they played at, in Stony Brook. The Ramones played everywhere. And something that I had heard was that sometimes they would do 2 or 3 shows in a day. They would just show up, the gear would be set up for them, they do the hour, they get out of there, they go to the next spot. So that might help explain why they were able to play so many small places. But Twisted Sister, who you see listed, they were a famous cover band long before they were a famous hard rock original band. So they played around here, and that is very much every Saturday night it Speaks. I believe it. That is echoed by David Decter rather in there. Rat Race Choir on Wednesdays, Zebra, also a cover band turned original band from the area, and they're going to come up again. One of those, we're going to come back to that. But next slide, Industry. The bottom 2 photos on the left, that is a shirtless Mark Wahlberg, aka Marky Mark, performing there in Island Park. And this was kind of a harder rock club that is believed to have been in the same spot as the Action House and Speaks and Rock Pile. So it is believed to have been at 50 Broadway, not at 50 Austin Boulevard. And White Zombie was a performer there. Their singer Rob Zombie's now a big director. Erasure, Monster Magnet, The Misfits before Glenn Danzig rejoined, Helmet, Life of Agony, Sevendust, LA Guns, Biohazard, Clutch, Slaughter, lots of people. I think I read that Madonna played there in an earlier incarnation. I haven't had proof of that found yet, but we're going to move to the next one. And before we go, as proof, that White Zombie shirt says Island Park, New York on it. And that is a photo in the bottom right of Erasure in drag at the club for an album release party. I'm not sure how that went over back in that day, but hopefully they eventually come back to Island Park or Lido Beach. The next slide. Some other venues that there's not that much about. South Water Beach Club, 50 Broadway, again, not 50 Austin Boulevard. Dropkick Murphys played there. That is a band that played Fenway Park in the last couple of years. They play arenas and stadiums. Newfound Glory, they opened up for the Offspring this summer at Jones Beach. The Bouncing Souls big band. Different things I found online said the Beach Boys in America. I don't think that is correct. The Beach Boys have been playing large venues for 50 plus years now, closer to 60 years. I don't think that they were here unless it was a private event. I've seen a couple of Beach Boys private shows. I just don't think that they were playing here when they could have been playing Jones Beach personally or Westbury. Next one, sometimes it's called Network, sometimes it's called Fillmore. It's at 2000 Long Beach Road. Madonna did play there. A lot of punk bands. Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, who's also known as John Lydon, played there. Sylvain from the New York Dolls played there. The Damned played there. We see a flyer there from the Freelance Vandals. That is a band that I mentioned before, kind of kings of the club scene out here. In the top right, you see a Village Voice article that was kind of about how Island Park was the rage for teen clubs. I don't know if you could really believe that, but the media said that. But Less Than Jake, I'm getting in it was, but Less Than Jake also played at South Beach Water Club. They are also a band that's played huge arenas over the years. And it looks like the Fillmore had some real hardcore and punk bands like Discharge there, the Nihilistics, the Effigies. I want to see video of that if ever possible. I'm going to keep searching for that. A little more on the Fillmore. Here is one of the punk hardcore show flyers for the Misguided, the False Prophets. I grabbed that from a New York City hardcore Instagram account called the NYHC Flyer a Day Project. Hopefully more pops up from there. Then moving ahead a little bit to present day. Uh, the venues on Long Island, yes, big deal. But people don't always talk about these spots in Long Beach and Island Park. They absolutely highlight what a vibrant cultural past that these towns had. Yet we shouldn't just be talking in the past sense. We should also be talking about now. So if we look at that bottom photo on the left, the King Coyote with Pete Francis of Dispatch, rather. The former singer of Dispatch played in Long Beach a couple of months ago, just on the West End, and I think this was at Speakeasy, just on a Friday or Saturday night, $15. Dispatch played Madison Square Garden multiple times, and he was here. If you look in that middle photo, you see Shane Gillis, second from the left. He just did 2 nights in Madison Square Garden. He performed at Borelli's doing comedy like 2 years ago, and Borelli's has had Whitney Cummings and Jim Brewer, Gilbert Gottfried, Colin Quinn, just notable people, and they're playing in town on the West End. Dice Clay was another big one. If we look a little to the right of that, we see DMC from Run DMC, and that photo was taken largely because of Tom and the Long Beach Public Library when they hosted DMC here at the library. That stage that DMC is holding his hand out on, it was with D's Guys where he performed here. I think it was January 04, I'm sorry, January 2024. There's video of it online. I'm getting a that's right for that. But we had a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer here, and a year and a half later, he performed at Bright Eye Brewery across the street, also performing with these guys. And that's not the only notable that we've had here in the library. A couple of years ago, I interviewed Nancy Cartwright, who does the voice of Bart Simpson outside the library when we had the film festival here. Every now and then, a really notable person comes through with the Long Beach International Film Festival, and sometimes those screenings happen here in town. And what I'm trying to say is it's the past, present, and the future. It's not always fully documented. MF Doom, one of the most celebrated rappers of all time, there's a street named after him a couple blocks away because he grew up around here. And Lil Peep, really famous rapper who died probably 6, 7 years ago, also grew up a couple of blocks around here. I think a block or two south of the Starbucks that used to be Leone's. Yet Long Beach did not necessarily embrace him while he was here. I don't know if he ever performed live here, maybe at the Long Beach High School talent show. But long story short, stuff has been happening consistently here since the late 50s. It happened with Barbra Streisand in the 60s. If we go all the way back to that hotel gig, the Pink Palace, just kind of recapping. Barbra Streisand was here in the 60s. and Miss Azores was here as well, but that's neither here nor there. And Carmine Appice was living around here. And the 70s, we saw the Action House and the Rock Pile and the Speaks kind of stuff. Malibu was really cool in the 80s and the 90s. And U2, before they were a stadium band, were here. And the key is we have to let all of this history be preserved. We have to let it breathe. We have to let it be documented. And the New York Times thought we were great enough. I think we're great enough. So, in conclusion, Long Beach has something for everybody. Island Park has something for everybody, past, present, and future. If you want to read more about these venues, go to the LibGuide that's linked in the bottom left. Just search LibGuide, one word, put in Darren Paltrowitz or Paltrocast, it'll link to that. If you want to hear more about Long Beach in general, check out the Paltrocast with Darren Paltrowitz. It's on Spotify, Apple, paltrocast.com. Long Beach is also in my book, DLR book, How Daily Raw Changed the World. You can find more about me on paltrocast.com. Hope to do more presentations here, thanks to Long Beach Public Library. And if anyone has any questions through the chat, you know where to get me. Otherwise, thank you for having me.
Paltrocast.